Mass immigration in Canada has reached a boiling point with growing public outcry. The National Citizens Coalition, called NCC, is a conservative group advocating for less government, and they've recently declared that immigration is still out of control. This follows the meeting hosted by Ontario Premier Doug Ford in Muskoka earlier this week, where Canadian premiers and Prime Minister Mark Carney discussed all things Canadian energy, trade, and jobs. But the NCC says, don't just buy Canadian, prioritize hiring Canadian. They cite 3 million temporary residents straining housing, healthcare, and social services, with many now illegal as their permits expire. NCC notes that 1 in 5 workers in Canada are non-Canadians, sidelining citizens in an already strained, tough job market, while a staggering 1 in 88 people are asylum seekers, overwhelming resources alongside rising youth unemployment. This is clearly unsustainable, and it also poses a national security risk. Joining me now is NCC director, columnist, and best-selling Substack writer Alex Brown to explain why politicians continue to largely ignore this growing issue.
Gee, we only have so long to talk about this, but the concern is that they're because they're benefiting from it, because they have partners who love and now increasingly are dependent on cheap foreign labor. And it has been incredibly concerning to be looking at Muskoka and this lavish meeting, it's still an important meeting. There's a lot going on. There is the tariff issue. There is the interprovincial trade barriers needing to get yanked down. But they're signing, all these understandings and these promises to do better. But we're still not seeing these energy projects get made. And then meanwhile, we're leaving out what to so many is that elephant in the room, which is that we're talking about protecting Canadian jobs right now in relation to the tariff threat. And that's incredibly important because Canadian jobs are at risk in manufacturing, key sectors, steel, energy, you name it, automotive. But we have hundreds of thousands out of work. We have the town where they were in. I put this in a little video on Twitter as well. I was just walking and rambling, which is up in Muskoka right now, where they've been riding the banana boat, and Carney and Ford have been making s'mores evidently till 12:30 and patting each other on the back, which I think further solidifies people's concerns about maybe the Ford government's and Ford camp's behavior during the federal election. Is that there's thousands of local kids whose summer job no longer exists. There's grocery store workers who've been replaced by 37-year-olds from India, and communities that are being changed by these fraudulent career colleges that just offer management degrees and not the big ones that we actually need, like STEM, the trades, medicine. And whether it is solely to the benefit of some corporate partners or the governments themselves are enjoying, some of the fruits of this labor, it's unsustainable. We're talking about finally doing right by Canada's promise for the first time in years. The Liberals seem to be course correcting, or at least saying that they are. But until they start hiring Canadian, until we start weaning these big companies, many of whom have massive government subsidies, off cheap foreign labor, it's incredibly hollow because they're not hiring Canadian. We're at risk of a generation of young Canadian citizens failing to launch because they can't even get their foot in the door, because that foot in the door has, that door has been propped open for folks that we've never let in before, and no full discredit to them, but that's not fair. It's not fair to our present working generation, and it's not fair to our future working generation.
Now, aside from the political and corporate elite prioritizing cheap foreign labor over Canadian workers, what cannot be ignored any longer is the growing number of youth struggling to enter the job market. Supporters of the temporary foreign worker program say Canadians, and youth included, don't want these jobs, but Brown warns that this isn't true and instead denies youth entry-level positions and ultimately the opportunity to build confidence and career foundations.
And it's a cope, and I understand that there might be certain companies in very specific instances, but we have record youth unemployment. You go online and you see the TikToks, and these kids are miserable, and like they're even handing their resumes in person, which the the liberal boomers online are yelling at them to do, saying, implying that they're lazy. They're not lazy. It's we all had unglamorous starting points. Like I was pumping gas. I was planting trees, landscaping, doing a terrible job at it, a terrible job. But my empathy for the situation of these kids right now, and for I'm an increasingly an aging millennial, so I'm aging out of the cohort, but I personally can see myself in some of these kids where it's like, if I wasn't able to get an early hand up, even if it was just for a few bucks an hour, I needed to be part of a team. I needed confidence. I needed to get out of the house, especially now with how much time, folks are spending on social media, on apps that might not be all that great for the development of their brains. Like, they need to be out and about, and they need good habits, and without them, you could lose them. They won't get off the launch pad. And so I think it's a fair criticism to say, oh, these kids don't want to work these jobs, or they're low wage, but we all worked low wage jobs, and it's all gotten us to where we are now.
So what is corporate Canada's role in all of this? Well, Brown says that they perpetuate the crisis, and even points to a few specific examples, like the controversial lobbying group called the Century Initiative, which advocates for a Canadian population of 100 million by the year 2100, which Prime Minister Mark Carney has just recently appointed the co-founder of to his Council of Advisors on U.S.-Canada relations.
I mean, we have now, for example, 3 million temporary residents, which is obviously straining housing, healthcare, public services, not just jobs. We have hundreds of thousands who are now illegal as their permits expire, with no plan to address this growing crisis or to send them home. We have a new report today showing 1 in 5 workers in Canada are no longer even Canadian. So we're obviously sidelining our own citizens in a struggling job market. If you looked right now, this was just unearthed on social media, the Century Initiative, which is the big sort of mass immigration lobby group, which sponsors things in the Globe and Mail, and is part of this giant sort of op-ed opinion operation to be like, no, this is actually great. So it's reaching 20% in Toronto, youth unemployment. Who gives a darn? If you look at their corporate sponsors, and they happily celebrate it, it's the major banks. It's huge companies. And we know what these huge companies get out of it. They get cheaper folks, or let's say, if we're even trying to give them the benefit of the doubt here, with minimum wage increases in a place like Ontario, which went up by, $5-6 an hour over a period of years. If you're one of those companies, let's say you're Tim Hortons, and, it's not a coincidence that I'm mentioning Tim Hortons, maybe in your heart of hearts, you truly believe that if you're having to pay someone a sort of summer wage around $17 or $18 an hour, maybe you would rather have a 36-year-old than a kid starting off. But it's not sustainable, right? And so these are, when you give companies, especially coming out of COVID, with sort of a course correction to the business market and wanting to show growth where growth didn't exist in our economy by just moonshotting the population, you're giving inches, and of course they're going to take a mile. They're going to see, I can run for cheaper, I can treat workers like crap, pardon the swearing, but it's another argument to be made. It's not just some nativist thing. It's like, not only do the numbers not work, but if your economy now relies on a slave wage caste system of sort of replacement labor, and these folks are often forced to sleep 10, 15 to a basement in squalor, that's telling you that it's not acceptable. What you're even trying is not acceptable, and it tells you that this program should not be abused for lower wage opportunities. And that is what the temporary foreign worker program has turned into. It's what the foreign student program has largely been used for. It's supposed to be for high skill. It's supposed to be for the things that are in demand. These positions weren't actually in demand, say for agriculture. We're just getting cheap. And we've given these companies an excuse, a massive excuse, when the sort of cardinal sin was shutting down our economy for a few years. And then we said, hey, we're just going to give you an infinite supply of cheap labor to give it a boot and give it a kick in the pants. And Well, the time has more than come to course correct for that, and to tear down that sort of post-COVID operation that is now no longer serving the Canadian worker whatsoever.
Now, Canada's reliance on cheap foreign labor demands a course correction to prioritize Canadian workers and public services, a stance that Brown says most Canadians support, and especially recent immigrants.
Gee, there's another poll today that came out that the majority of Canadians still feel that even the revised Carney targets are too high. And the real number in there that's important is that it's recent immigrants to Canada, and immigrants to Canada selected for inside this poll who have the biggest problem with how out of control this number has gotten, because they came the right way. They came on points. They came on skill. They left some of the diaspora nonsense and violence and criminality behind, because the unfortunate truth of this situation is that in letting absolutely everybody in, you're going to let in some bad apples. And how insulting that is to our proud first, second, third generation immigrants who really came here to be a cohesive part of the Canadian community and to live the Canadian dream. And what are they getting now? They're just getting the insult of being undercut, and then potentially like lumped in with a not so great graduating class from the school of Sean Fraser and Mark Miller and now Lena Diab. And so that means a return to, there are more hardliners than myself, but it's a return to PR numbers that are within historical norms, like closer back to 2015. It is the abolishment of the temporary foreign worker program for positions that we shouldn't be letting companies use and abuse. It's shutting down like this massive pipeline now of fraudulent asylum claims, because you have all these students who are about to get the boot and their visas are expiring. And, even though they have like good family lives back home, they're suddenly going, oh no, wait, actually, the family farm back in Punjab is very dangerous for me and I'm two-spirit or something. And like, you can't send me back. And so like we now have hundreds of thousands of fake asylum claims too because of it. And so you've got to just cut all these little loopholes, because it's become this giant scam operation. You got to shut down the fake schools, and they are fake schools. I've heard from folks who've taught inside of them, and like, no one gives a darn. The kids don't even show up. Half of them don't speak English. I hate that sounds shallow and nativist. It is just true. You need to introduce country caps so you don't have too much of one group from one place, one from the other. There are just so many simple things. And then you have to prioritize actually sending a bunch of these folks, and predominantly young males, home, because we already have hundreds of thousands of expired visas. We're about to have millions. And there's a lot of folks who are just going to turn around and go, no, I'm going to stay. And that's not what this was supposed to be. This was taking advantage of the system. And this was a government that should have known better and has set almost all Canadians up for failure, but particularly young and working Canadians because of it.
So is it too late? Well, Brown warns that the crisis is a massive, underreported mess, but that it still can be salvaged if action starts now.
There's no time like the present to at least try. It's like it's a massive mess. Like I talk to people with high up portfolios. I talk to people in security and intelligence and in ministry offices, and they're going, you got no idea how bad this actually is. Like we let in some bad dudes. Like we let in, the kind of fighting age males that you normally see, hopping off the small boats in Europe. And there's some really deep concerns about infiltration, and we already see these stories and spikes in crime rates from some guys we never would have let in the first place. But it doesn't mean you don't try, because it's only going to get worse. Like we can at least, stem the tide, surely. Whether we can make up for, with what we've done to our public services, like these massive backlogs now over the next few years, I'm not so sure. But this could break even worse. That's the concern, right? Like 20% youth unemployment could become 30 very quickly. Adult unemployment could go to 10%, 15%. More hospital emergency rooms could be closing overnight. And I think people have to be careful what they wish for. And it is a fight worth undertaking. And it is a really important time for folks to be loud and to advocate on behalf of the Canadian worker and young Canadians right now, because when the House resumes in the fall, the Liberals are going to attempt to get away with this again. Like, we see the Century Initiative is out saying, actually, this is great. You know, don't believe the stats. Don't listen to the local kids. Don't talk to your neighbors about it. It's like this COVID whisper campaign all over again, but it's for replacement labor. No, this is, these kids are supposed to have a birthright. This country is supposed to mean something. It is not some hollow economic zone. It was a wonderful place to grow up. Like, you and I, we grew up in a great era. The fact that our kids and grandkids and even like working prime Canadians aren't getting that right now, like, they deserve so much better. And so this will be a fight worth having. And it's in some ways, yes, we have to build pipelines. Yes, we have to get out of our way on so many things. In some ways, at least to me, it's the most important fight that we have right now.
As Canada's Liberal government undermines youth by prioritizing cheap foreign labor, it's clear that hiring Canadians first must become a central political priority. Hard caps, deporting lawbreakers, and those with expired visas, while prioritizing Canadian hiring will work to reclaim control and secure our nation's future. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. Canadians are suffering as a result of uncontrolled immigration under the continued Liberal reign. From climbing unemployment, skyrocketing cost of living, a housing crisis, and in general, our social systems are buckling at the seams. Please sign our petition at netzeroimmigration.com to demand that Mark Carney stop the unmitigated influx of immigrants to Canada and get this situation under control. That's netzeroimmigration.com.